This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Welcome in to the Triple Option. Paul Catalina and Steven Simcox. Big news here in Central Texas today. Scott Drew is staying here. He is not going to Kentucky, as we correctly predicted.
Yep.
I'm going to brag about that, saying we correctly predicted it, although I wasn't feeling good about that at certain points over the last 24 hours.
But you were right ultimately.
Yeah, like I'll take it. Like I'll take the dub here, and it just comes down to this Kentucky missed their window with Scott Drew. There was a time where they probably could have gotten him. But it was not now, although it got close. It got close. I've talked to several people off the record, and I've gotten the impression that he's now gotten everything he wants here at Baylor. Like, really turning down Louisville and Kentucky within a span of 10 days has helped him solidify that for however long he's still here. And I don't think it's going to be that long before Ashley Hodge even says like 5 to 7 years before he retires, has, pretty much his 50s to himself.
Right.
And so because he's been working really hard since he was 30 years old, essentially here at Baylor to build what he's built. And so that's what, so he's gotten everything he wants. I don't think he's going to have to worry about NIL anymore. I don't think he's going to have to ever, ask a kid what's the number and then call up and then they'll say, well, see if you can get him for this. I think he gets his yes now. And he certainly earned that. So, and also there are just some things going on here just in his life and his family that it's just not the right time to leave. It's not the right time. His kids are in. He's got one kid in college. He's got two in high school. And if you've ever moved a kid when they are a teenager.
You moved a lot growing up, right?
Yeah. The last time I moved I was 11.
Okay.
Which is about the last year that you can get away with it without a lot of like
fallout.
Screw you, Dad. How you do this to me? I had a life back home. Now we're here. A lot of Uncle Buck stuff.
Hey, that was a great impression. I thought I was watching Cheaper by the Dozen for a minute or something.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. This the last time, when you're 11 years old, you might have a little fifth grade girlfriend. Mm-hmm. You held hands in the haunted house line and shared a peck or two. But, it's not real love. It's not anything that when you move a kid who's like 14, oh dear God. And I can tell you this because my family moved here when my sister was in high school, and I'll leave it at that. But it's not. I have personal experience. You see it because they're at a transition point. And look, not to say that Scott Drew has any kind they're like the sweetest people in the world. But you're at a point where it better be for all the right reasons and not just because it's Kentucky. And I think ultimately when it came down to it, Steven, that's what the reason would have been it's Kentucky. Well, okay.
It was a really good case study. And I mean, it's always hard to know. All these coaches and players, they're wired. They're so competitive. They want to be at the highest level. They want to have, the biggest job. And Kentucky has obviously historically been kind of the holy grail of college hoops and at least the top level of the sport in a lot of ways. But one, a ton of coaches talk about family values and their faith, and when it comes down to it, some of it's kind of a sham. For Scott, it's really genuine. I mean, he's a very genuine person. I think he really did consider this and pray about it, and ultimately, it wasn't the right time to make the move. And I don't know how much this came into mind for him because this is just the first thing I thought about when the rumor started. Barring something crazy, he can he's at Baylor for however long he wants to be. Mm-hmm. And Kentucky is the type of place where if you get bounced in the first weekend a few years in a row, even if you're John Calipari, you're kind of looking for a parachute out of there. Like, it's just, it's a pressure cooker. And I think he could have done a really good job there, but you're one or two disappointing seasons away from being asked to leave. And I mean, that's something that he's never experienced in his career. Like, he's experienced pressure, obviously, but not that type of spotlight. And so I think it was better for everybody involved. And, I mean, it's a huge win for the university and the program, obviously. Huge win recruiting-wise. I mean, this guy's going to be here. And they can just kind of continue to roll along. And ultimately, it was only like 2 or 3 days of a distraction in the middle of the offseason, and he's still the coach. So, yeah, just a crazy turn of events. But I did go to sleep last night, Paul, thinking I think he's probably going to do this, which I didn't have that opinion until last night, but it had gotten to the point where I was like, he hasn't really made a statement. There's still a lot of things that seem to be trending that way. And then ultimately, though, he decided that it was best to just stay put.
Yeah, and look, I think that with what he can build here, the stadium, like there was a time where this would have been like, well, somebody finally figured out that Scott's a pretty damn good coach. Mm-hmm. And look, there have been people who've come and knocked before, but, because this was the program that he built, it was going to take one of those like diamond level jobs. And there's only I wouldn't even put UCLA in that category right now. I would put them just in that level below. It's close. Like if they hauled off and won a national championship or two over the next 15 years, then they're back in that level. They've achieved that. But right now, look, it's North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, and Kentucky. That's the 4 jobs that they call. You're like, well, I'm going to talk to him.
And, I mean, for Baylor at this point, KU.
And maybe UConn now.
But UConn could be. But Kansas is preset. Yeah. Duke and UNC seem to be in-house places. I mean, it's just if somebody's going to leave, they know who's going to be next. Mm-hmm. And this was the first time that you had an opening like this in a long time. And they survived it with Scott deciding to stay here. Yeah.
So lucky them. That they did. Mm-hmm. But they did everything that they had to do to get it done. Now, I guess the question remains, where does Kentucky go from here? I do think that Billy Donovan is in play. Nothing he said makes me think he's out of it, because here's the one thing I'm surprised about is that, he said in the press conference he's committed to the Bulls. Well, yeah, if they hired Scott Drew before they hired him, if he'd have been like, come and get me, Michael Jordan ain't walking through that door, and Jerry Reinsdorf is nuts. It's cold here. I don't like it. The traffic is insane. The speed limit's 55 miles an hour. I don't know how you people do it. Yes, I understand it's a great sports town, but I'm fed up. So, look, I'll kill a guy if Tony Kukoc would walk through that door right now. And I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Does Caleb Williams play basketball?
Is Bill Wennington around? Give me that. No, he's not going to say that. He's going to look, I'm committed to the Bulls. Because he is.
He's there coaching the team,
Yeah, and then until the point where he's like, I do want to go back to Kentucky, because he was there under Pitino as an assistant. So until that point, he can't just be like, oh, you guys have no idea what a nightmare this place is.
Well, and
the air conditioning in my office never works.
You really only have about 2 weeks left. I mean, the Bulls are in the play-in situation right now. They're not trending in the right direction, but they're still technically there. I guess he could leave early. It's not a great look, but it's also professional sports. We all lived through the Bobby Petrino Falcons experience, where he just, what did he do? Probably left a letter in the locker room and basically just hightailed out of town. He's like, you guys know I suck. I'm gone. Okay. This is not the right place for me. Sorry. I'm going to move on. I couldn't foresee Billy Donovan doing that. I guess he could. The issue is, though, with the way college sports works now, 2 weeks in the transfer portal era, that's a huge deal. We saw Calipari, he made that joke at the Arkansas press conference where he was like, I went to go meet the team, and there was no team. But that's how college basketball works now. If you have a coaching transition, in a lot of cases, you might have 1 or 2, maybe up to 4 guys, but there's not a lot of commitments there, and so you really have to build a roster from scratch. So it's a tough place to be for Kentucky, and it does kind of feel like, I totally get shoot for the people you want. but it does sort of feel like the divorced dad hitting the bar again.
Yeah.
20 years later and striking out with everybody and being like, oh no, do I not have it anymore? Like, do these pickup lines not work? Because Scott Drew swinging a miss. Hurley appears to be that way. Maybe they can talk him into leaving if it's more money's involved. But it's one of those things. I mean, it's not the job it used to be, even though I get why fans feel entitled to that type of situation. When
I was in college, there's a house that a bunch of our friends lived in, and it kind of rotated through. Like, it was owned by a group of people who went to my high school, and then they just rented it out to kids that were like from our high school that went to FSU years and years. It was on a cul-de-sac. Eventually, like they rented to it, like people rented 2 other houses on that same thing. So it was right near the stadium. So before every football game, that's where we went to party. They had a bar with a keg installed. It was quite a wonderful place.
Sounds pretty awesome.
I remember as a 19-year-old thinking like,
this is
the height of luxury. This is how you live. This is how you have to live. But the one thing that would occasionally happen that would make that place sad, you knew it even then, was like you said, the dad coming back to the bar was like a guy who was like 29 and be like, I used to run this town, man. I used to run this town. They still do quarter wings on Friday nights? They still do that? We're going to go? We're going to party Friday. Like, awesome. You'd be like, yeah, man.
It's not really the vibe here,
Yeah.
Or you're not really in the.
Is that your son just waiting in the car? Like, you may want to just like, go back to the Ramada. Like, it's fine. Like, you saw your friends, you had a beer, it's over for you.
This is not an old school remake. Like, it's just.
No, it's just, I like, and I'll tell you, I had those memories of those people. And then, like, the year after I graduated, like, you go back up to a game and you would, like, hang out with your friends who are still there. And then you'd, like, I remember, like, my friend Ryan and I, the guy who got me this cup, by the way, walking up to girls and be like, hey, how's it going? They're like, oh, what do you guys do? Like, Ryan's like, oh, I work for AT&T, just graduated like a year and a half ago. I'm like, yeah, I'm a comedian. And they're like, oh, you're like 23? First job, not like one of these guys who's like already a lawyer. And and there was like, oh, okay, you're back here, huh?
Nice to meet you.
I was like, all right. Well, from now on, we'll just do like a 6 p.m. drive-by. Like, hey, guys, you want to go grab some pizza? And then I'll drop you off here where you can still, drink in your youth.
Or you just had to change up your approach and be like, oh, yeah, I'm just 5th year, changed my major a couple times.
Yeah.
Kind of finding myself.
Yeah. Look, Bert Kreischer did go to my school, so it wasn't that weird of a thing. Yeah. But, like, that's kind of how, and it is. That's a good metaphor for Kentucky of the old guy at the bar. And I will liken it to the Texas post-Mac Brown search. Because Calipari and Mac Brown pretty much are like fair comps as far as it comes to career accomplishments. And, one national title, built up like the team that won the national title was a super team. They got close a little bit after, but then eventually did not adapt enough to the rest of the world of college basketball or college football. And then when you have to push a legend out the door, when you have those things, you say, okay, well, who's the next big thing that we can get? And then the rest of the world, like, nobody's really passed Kentucky by when it comes to the glory of the program.
Right.
But there's things that are, your money doesn't, like, knock people over as much as it used to.
Sure.
And so it's not the same thing anymore where you can't just be like, all right, we'll take this guy. Mm-hmm. Because you remember, Texas fans genuinely thought they were getting Nick Saban.
Oh, yeah.
And then they genuinely thought they were getting Jimbo Fisher. And then they genuinely thought they were getting Art Briles, and Art Briles was a step down from those two. And then, like, they didn't get that, and then they didn't even get Jim Mora Jr., so then they went to Charlie Strong. I think Mitch Barnhart will handle it better than Texas did at the time, but you have to be wary of letting the fans write your list for you.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes the fan, like, would any Baylor fan have ever hired Matt Rule? No, not a chance.
No.
Would
didn't even know who he was, really.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
majority of them, yeah.
Yeah. Would any Notre Dame fan have wanted Lou Holtz back in the day? Probably not. Like, they probably had their sights set on somebody a little bit bigger, right? Sure. Than the guy who's a coach at Arkansas and the failed coach of the Jets. Right. They would have wanted something bigger. Sometimes you got to let the people who know do their job and trust in that. Now, look, I understand that Kentucky fans are mistrustful when it comes to that because of the Billy Gillispie situation. Mm-hmm. But, look, everybody has some duds. And the fact that they must-have national title on resume, or we're going to rage, and even if they have a national title, some of us still might rage about this, which is what happened with Coach Drew, is a strange thing to me. Like, sometimes maybe you need to let somebody who's ready to do that, like a Sean Miller or a Mick Cronin or somebody who is a good coach at a smaller program but needs your resources, come in and do that. Correct me if I'm wrong, how many national titles did Dan Hurley have before he got the job at UConn, who had 4 before he got there?
Zero.
Okay. So would any UConn fan, if you asked them, like, hey, we're going to hire this guy, Dan Hurley, he's Bobby Hurley's brother, and his dad is Bob Hurley Sr., like the most legendary high school basketball coach in the history of the Northeast. And they're like, yeah, but how many national titles does he have? Mm-hmm. Well, none yet, but we think he can do one here. And they'll be like, well, no, I mean, I want somebody with a national title. Like, did you call John Calipari? Did you call, who did you call? Right. And then now he's got 2. Like, so you can't just set that thing there's only a few active coaches with national titles.
You also have to have the self-awareness of the Texas comp's a good one because, and one of the things we heard about Texas for years, and Sark eventually kind of figured out a good balance, but there were just so many people meddling in the institution, right? And there was a ton of pressure, and you had to appease everybody. And I have a friend who knows some power brokers in Kentucky that says one of the things about the Kentucky job, the donors have to be in the locker room. Like, they have to have full access. They have to have a huge say in what's going on. And you already kind of see the narrative building of, like, well, maybe Coach Drew just wasn't, like, he couldn't handle that type of situation. He wasn't tough enough for it, whatever. I think Kentucky also has to examine, like, you have to have a healthy environment for a coach that wants to come in and compete. And now with NIL, you have coaches that are doing more than ever before. They're doing roster management. They're trying to, have relationships with parents and kids, deal with all that. And also all the politics that comes with college sports. Like, you got to figure out a balance of how do we support this person? Mm-hmm. They understand what the expectations are, but how can we come together to make it to where they can succeed at the highest level, know? And that's got to get figured out too, because ultimately, like, guys like Scott Drew and Coach Hurley that have a ton of support where they are feel like they have job security. They're not always going to want to make that jump, even if it's a better job, quote unquote.
Yeah, and look, you have to listen, but that is something about it. That is certainly something you have to take into account. That, again, the grass is not always greener, and I'll just put it to you this way: if Scott Drew really is only going to coach 7 more years max. Because Ashley said that, like, to us a couple times. Like, he's really maybe a guy, and, like, I'll even give him to 10. If it's only going to be 10 years, and Scott's 48 years old right now, right? So if he's only going to coach until he's 58 maximum, well, what would it make? Like, even especially if it's 5 years. Mm-hmm. What if you coach just 5 more years here, wins 1 more national title, which is certainly is possible, wins a national title, is like, you know what? That's it.
Yep.
It's time for me to, I'm really enjoying this, The kids will all kind of be in college by then. Like, I want to be able to do, more things. I want to do that. Well, then what good would it do to move? Like, at that point, you're actually doing a disservice to Kentucky because you're there. And if you left. So it's one of those things that, I think that, I'm glad he made that decision. The right decision was the one that's going to make him and his family happiest. Sure. And I think that's what he did. But I'm sure this was difficult.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like, it's the job. I'm sure a lot of people in basketball circles were like, you got to take it because it's Kentucky. And, that pressure's real. And then also trying to make that decision in the spotlight of, it's why we love college sports, but people caring about the restaurant that
Scott's
you're at
53.
for lunch. 53, okay.
53. I thought he was younger.
He seems a lot
He seems younger. He seems younger.
He took the job when he was like 17.
Yeah.
Not really, but kind of.
Here's the other reason. I'm going to tell you this. We have a media mixer with the coaches every year. Mm-hmm. One with the football coaches and one with all the other coaches. And the one with the all the other coaches, they had a Connect 4 tournament. And I was doing very well. Mm-hmm. Jack was there, and I beat Glenn Moore in 4 moves, which is, in his terms, a perfect game. So, perfect game.
Put a video up. Is Glenn Moore washed? Just getting skunked by Paul Catalina in Connect 4?
Yeah. And then Scott and I had an epic battle, which came down to the last couple of
moves.
But here's the thing. It was only epic because he made it that way. He played me into a corner, and I didn't realize it until it was too late.
Wow.
It was a strategy all along. And just because when they were in the bubble, they played Connect 4 nonstop. And so he got really good at it.
Gotcha.
So here's the deal. I get a rematch now. If not, we were going to have a rematch in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm not going out on a losing note. Okay. And I'm not going to beat him at anything basketball related. But I feel like
there's a chance.
I have a chance at Connect 4.
You're not going to make him make you feel like Mark Few in a Connect 4 tournament or something.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. When we come back, we'll talk about where Kentucky goes now, and we're going to do a new segment, a new thing.
I love it.
It's called Sponsor Recruiting. We're trying to recruit a sponsor, and it's a sponsor who has a mission that I feel very passionate about.
Okay.
So we're going to do that next. This is the Triple Option on 365 Sports.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Welcome back, Paul Catalina and Steven Simcox, and we're going to do something. We have actually several new sponsors coming on the next couple weeks that will get a lot of play on this show. But before those contracts start, I'm going to make an attempt here to rope in one. I've already applied. I've sent them messages, but I want to somehow put this over the top. So, Steven, you see there, bidetking.com. So this segment's going to be titled, Let's Clean It Up at Kentucky, brought to you by bidetking.com. I recently read an article in the Washington Post about people who bought bidets in a panic during the pandemic because of our toilet paper shortage nationwide.
That makes sense, yeah.
What those people didn't know that I already did, as a longtime bidet owner now, there's 2 in my home. There's 1 here in my office. If you turn around, there's a bidet in that bathroom right behind you.
You travel with one.
I travel with one. Yes, I do. I have a travel bidet.
You have a 2-bidet household?
I have a 2-bidet household. Soon to be 3. Soon to be 3, because I have 3 toilets. And one of them is currently bidetless, but that will no longer happen after a couple of weeks. So
that's what we call YouTube money, folks.
That's right. So, and look, they're not expensive. And some people say, ooh, gross, a bidet. Why would you do that? And I would say this, Stephen. If you and I got in a tussle outside, say we were on Bourbon Street. You've been to Bourbon Street, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Bourbon Street is lined with horse manure because they have horseback police officers, mounted police, walking around, or, trotting around and making sure that there's no kerfuffles. Well, say we were in some kerfuffle, and I threw you down into a pile of horse manure.
Oh, no.
And you got up, and you were like, oh, my gosh. And Garrett said, oh, that was wrong of Paul to do that.
Yep.
Hey, let me have you clean up. Here's a thin roll of dry paper This is all we have for you.
That's not going to cut it. That thing's going to break immediately.
Yeah.
I have to put it in the trash.
Yeah, again. Or if Garrett said, hey, there's a hose out back of this bar here. Why don't we hose you off before we go back to the hotel and change clothes? Wouldn't you feel better?
Definitely.
So why do we treat any other part of our body differently?
That's a good point, Paul.
BidetKing.com. I will not rest until there's a bidet in every home, public bathroom, and hotel in America. BidetKing.com.
You've convinced me. I'm a simple man from a simple town, but I'm going to look it up now because this is just a part of hygiene that I haven't considered.
Yes. So thank you to BidetKing.com in advance for what I think will be a magnificent partnership. And Garrett, is there a person, a celebrity, like there's not even a celebrity in this country. No. If Beyonce tried to sell this, it would not go as well as if I did. She does not have the belief that I do.
No, I mean, you're a seasoned vet here. You're experienced. You understand the benefits of it. You're all on board, and I think you're the perfect candidate to be pushing the Bidet King.
Yes. So, BidetKing.com. So let's clean up the mess at Kentucky. Brought to you by BidetKing.com. Right. So there we go.
The real BK.
There we go. So now I have that video to send to them. And they'll see how passionate I am about this.
If you don't get it, I don't even know why they're doing business.
Well, exactly.
Cut that part out, Garrett. Don't let them see it.
They're missing a chance here.
Well, let's clean it up, Paul.
Let's clean it up. Okay, so where do you go, Steven? If you had the choice now, so Hurley's out. Jay Wright's out. Mm-hmm. Both of those were always going to be out. Scott Drew has, as of this morning, told you no. Mm-hmm. Where does Steven Simcox, new Kentucky associate AD under Mitch Barnhart, walk into his boss and say, listen, Mitch, I got the guy. Who's your guy?
This is a great question. And it kind of goes in the same path that they have been treading down. And I don't know if it's the most successful play. But I would probably pick up the phone and call my friend Kelvin Sampson and say, hey, I know you've come close at Houston. Whatever you feel like you're missing, we can get you there. I know Houston has become kind of like a basketball school again in this renaissance. But I think that would be my first phone call. You know, they already went the Nate Oates route too, and that quickly was squashed. I don't think they want to wade in the waters of somebody like Chris Beard or apparently Will Wade. But I will say this about Will Wade, and I was talking to Garrett about this before the show. I would probably call Will Wade too because, I mean, what he was accused of is now legal. He's not.
That's why I put Sean Miller in this as well.
Yeah, I don't get the impression that he's like a Bible study leader, but okay, he was going to pay some people. Like, you can do that now. Kentucky just had John Calipari, who is kind of cut out that same mold, like a renegade, an outlaw, does his own thing. So those would be my first two calls. What about you, Paul? Where are you pivoting now?
My pivot, I'm going full court press on Billy Donovan. I think that's a win for me as the AD. Mm-hmm. I think that's a win for the fans will be thrilled. They've always kind of romantically wanted him there anyway. I think it's probably a win for him. I think it's probably a win for the Bulls. They're okay. And I think the Bulls know who they are. But especially after the alley-oops they had the other night, which was just, I mean, every sports blooper video now for the end of time to is going to lead off with that play.
There's two guys trying to go for a dunk. Yep. Knocking each other over.
Yeah, that is that play right there will be there. So I'm going for Billy Donovan. If I'm Billy Donovan, I can say, let's not pretend like we're anything other than we are. Yeah. Let's just go ahead and do this, and I'll go. And to me, where this gets kind of interesting is he's coaching the Bulls into the playoffs. I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
They're unless they have some sort of ridiculous
they're not
Leicester City type run.
They're not winning an NBA title.
They're not they're not going to get past the Celtics in the East in 7 games. You know, that's just not going to happen.
If Billy Donovan's done with the NBA, it doesn't really matter how he exits here.
Yeah.
Like he can, if he's willing to stomach the bad PR for a few days and a few weeks of, okay, people of Chicago aren't really going to like me. These players and coaches around the league are probably going to talk behind my back. But unless he has plans of, you know, coaching the Celtics someday, the way he leaves here is not really a big concern. And you know, it's a business. Like, is it the best way to do it? No. But I think it would blow over and people would understand if he was successful at UK.
Yeah. No, and look, the Bulls have had one successful era, and it was because of Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan, in whatever order you'd like to say that in.
Sure.
But, you know, Michael Jordan was the driving force of that. There's not too many of those guys. So the next time one walks through the door, if you can get him, then you can get him. But right now, the Bulls are not going to, you know. And if you look at around the team, like if you look around the league at the teams that are winning the championships, they have the kind of players the Bulls don't.
Right.
But the Bulls don't have one single player that, you know, they don't have a Steph Curry. They don't have, you know, a Giannis. They don't have a Joker. They don't have a Luke. Like Luka's not even won one yet, but they don't even have that kind of guy. Like they don't have that guy. You know, they don't have a Jaylen Brown. They don't have them. They're just not there, right? So,
did they kick the tires on Bruce Pearl at all?
I wonder if they might. Because
that seems like another way you could go. I mean, Bruce has done a good job. He's coming off a first-round exit, which I know is not what they want. But he knows the SEC. That seems like a great regional fit, too. And, again, a guy that kind of dealt with some scandal, but it was pre-money era where it was basically just a lot of things that are legal now. And so you're not dealing with a super shady past of any sort.
Yeah. No, I like again, like part of Bruce Pearl's thing was he was having the players over for barbecues.
Yeah.
You know, like it seemed like sometimes you hear these things and then you like step back. I remember when Jim Tressel got in trouble for lying about tattoos.
Right.
I was like, man, that was just really dumb, Jim. Like, why would you jeopardize your career for that? And then I understand the impulse to be like, look, who's going to keep asking about this? It's a tattoo.
Right.
Like, it's not really fungible. It's not like, you know, he gets this $300, $400, $500 expensive tattoo, and then he can take it off. Terrell Pryor can take it off his arm and be like, listen, I'll give you this one for $750. It's already done. Right here. You know, like it just seems so dumb, you know? And so that's why like some of the rules, like when they brought in that Condoleezza Rice council of people who like went through the rules, they're like, do you understand like how like silly this sounds when you're reading off the punishments? Like, yeah, it's you paid this recruit $750. Like $750? What I mean, what is it? 1805? $700? Like it's barely the rent on the apartment he's living in for 1 month.
That's what some of the donors pay for like tissue paper. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah, you read them and you're like, oh well, this is 5 level 1 violations because it was over 38 cents. And you're like, all right. Well, all right. I mean, I don't understand like you guys didn't kind of adjust these things with inflation, but all right.
Well, and who are the people that are like passionate about enforcing these rules? You know, like who grows up and is like, man, I just really want to be a stickler about benefits.
2 of the coaches we've mentioned today have gotten in slight bit of trouble with the NCAA. Scott Drew and Kelvin Sampson. Do you know what their egregious crime was? What horrible, heinous thing they did? How underhanded and dirty they did. They made too many phone calls.
Yeah, too many phone calls.
Too many phone calls. Phone calls. Like, oh, well, you're only supposed to have 300. You guys made 312. Great. Awesome.
Well, it's funny, too,
Sorry
think about Kelvin Sampson, like after one of those big wins. This was a long time ago now, but after the game, he's thanking Mac Rhodes for giving him a chance, you know, at Houston. And then you'd think, like, oh, yeah, Scandal was just making too many phone calls. Like, it wasn't like he did anything egregious.
Yeah.
He just broke the rules.
Yeah. And then they gave him a show cause penalty for that. Like, you cannot hire this guy without taking a penalty yourself. Like, oh, man, what did he do? Must have been bad. Like, he called a lot of people. It's kind of a minor annoyance to recruits.
He went over his screen time. We're really passionate about being present here, not being addicted to phones.
Yeah, so these things are silly, but
how long do you think this takes now? Because
I think he's got to get it done within the next 3 days.
Yeah, you've done this so publicly, and it's just been a mess so far.
Yeah, and look, the reason it's a mess is because you are swinging for the fences.
Right.
You are trying to get a big one, and that's great, but like you want to get the right guy. And look, I think probably Scott would have been the right guy for Kentucky. Like, that's a very good choice. He's the only one they've actually offered. Like, Nate Oates, Danny Hurley, and Jay Wright were just talked about. We didn't even know if they ever, Nate Oates was even in the conversation. He so fast tweeted out, like, I'm happy here at Alabama. I mean, that's just one of those Dan Lanning things. Mm-hmm. We know that Alabama probably would have called Dan Lanning.
Oh, yeah.
But since he didn't want to go, he could just use it to his advantage. Be like, listen, I've been to Alabama. I've been there, done that. I'm not about that life.
Yeah. He just called up the Oregon creative team and was like, let's just make another great hype video.
Yeah. I'm all about Oregon. I'm all about blonde dudes with dreads and skateboarding and legal weed. I'm thrilled with it. You know what they don't have in Alabama? A Nike store. You know what we have in Oregon? The Nike store.
The Nike headquarters.
The Nike headquarters.
I just walk down the street and get what I want.
Yeah. You know what movie they made that took place in Oregon? The Goonies. Just saying. Your move, A Time to Kill, which I think may have been Mississippi. But
not sure that was the pitch, but that's an interesting angle.
All right. The Goondocks are here. Do you want to go on an adventure for buried treasure? Can't do that in Tuscaloosa. Sure as hell can do it here.
Heck yeah, I want rain 275 days out of the year. I'm kind of moody. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and look, a lot of guys, like a lot of them are, a lot of Kentucky fans are saying, well, I never wanted him anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think that is true. But also I feel that that's a little bit scorned.
Oh, yeah. It's just coping.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the typical, like, I'm sure there was I know, based on the online reaction, there were a good amount of people that were like, this guy is not the dude, which is also kind of delusional. But now that it's done, it's like recruiting, you know, when 4 or 5-star player goes somewhere else, all of a sudden it's like, well, there were character concerns.
Yeah,
or we pulled the offer late. Like he didn't want to compete, blah, blah, blah. It's spinning something to try to make it fit, you know, what you want to believe.
All right, Garrett, I'm going to let you make your pitch for Kentucky to hire Will Wade.
I mean, to me, Will Wade is a personality that is a lightning rod, which is kind of, if you look at the track record of Kentucky coaches, Rick Pitino, Gillespie, even though that was a dumpster fire, and then the latest one with Calipari, they've all been very similar. I think Will Wade has proven that he knows how to navigate the current landscape of college athletics. He's young. He can relate to the players. And he's a winner. He's just a solid coach that could get guys in. He's the only person who's ever been able to get anything out of Ben Simmons. So just take that for what it is. Mm-hmm. I just think he would be an excellent fit there. Another one, if you're looking at a dark horse besides him, I think Greg McDermott. You give a guy who, if he can consistently take in Creighton deep with no resources essentially, he's had success at Iowa State, Northern Iowa. He took them to the tournament. You put him in Kentucky with the backing and the funding, I think he could do a hell of a job there personally.
Yeah, and that's a good name too. And that was one of the reasons I really thought Scott Drew would be a good fit at Kentucky, is because, you know, Calipari, not that he's not a smart basketball guy, but I've never considered him like big X's and O's
Right,
dude, right?
yeah.
Like it's all about bringing people in, allowing them to fit the system. You're going to be able to recruit well at Kentucky. Like anybody can go there and get players.
Yep.
What they need is somebody who can actually put a roster together, form an identity, and have like good strategy on the floor. And I think McDermott would make a ton of sense in that regard. And that's one of those under the radar names that isn't going to be a big splash hire, but like Paul said earlier, like you can't let message boards and fan reaction decide this. Like you got to go get your guy and be like, okay, we feel like this dude's smart. He's going to do a good job. And with the support he would have at Kentucky, like as opposed to what he did at Creighton, he could be, an amazing basketball coach. So that's got to be in the minds of this administration as they try to make a good decision.
By the way, Dan Hurley officially is not going to Kentucky.
Okay.
That's been announced. He's getting a pay bump. His staff's getting a pay bump, and much deserved for the first guy to go back to back since Billy Donovan.
Yeah.
So that's why, I do think that they really need to go that. Like Rick Pitino coming back would be very, very interesting. I don't know if you can do that given the fact that he says he regrets leaving Kentucky the first time. Mm-hmm. And then he came back and went to Louisville, which might be an unforgivable sin. Although his transgressions at Louisville helped run the program eventually into the ground. Slowly.
Right.
But
I just don't know. Obviously, like Rick has done some good turnaround jobs the last couple of years at smaller colleges. But it feels like if you bring in Rick, like he's got to win immediately.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to have a ton of patience for him. And I'm not sure if he has that sort of,
71, 72.
I know that too. Like how long is he going to want to be here? And now at this point, like it might be kind of a short-term stopgap type of thing. And then you circle back in a few seasons. But I know that's also not what Kentucky fans want to hear.
Yeah, it's not. When we come back, we're going to pivot from this for just a minute and talk about a major sports figure. OJ Simpson has passed away and his effect on our society, which is way more than I think in 1992 people thought it ever would be. Or a guy who is a football player in Hertz commercials and Naked Gun movies. That's next. This is the Triple Option on 365 Sports.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Alongside Stephen Simcox of Locked On Horned Frogs. And Stephen, OJ Simpson passed away after a battle with cancer today. And I would say that most of the world is not sympathetic to that at all. Most of the world, me included, believes him to be guilty of double murder. And here's the other thing about OJ Simpson is that there are moments in American history where things change and they're never going to be the same. The OJ Simpson trial was that. Mm-hmm. Like, that's where 24-hour news and especially tabloid news got such an influx of just of power and of eyeballs that even at like the ebbs and flows of it, it's never gonna go away.
Right.
Like the effects on American life because of the OJ Simpson trial and the way the media covered it, the way people started to think about the media, the way that people have reacted since then, has had tentacles into things that I'm not even going to go into because it will sound like a conspiracy theory, but it was one way before OJ and this way after. And we have that situation to blame for it because it was such a powder keg of wild coverage and different things because it was a very famous person on trial for double murder.
The crazy thing to me is, Garrett, how old were you? Because I was born in like 92, so I had no reference for the trial.
I was born in 85. Like I remember watching the chase, but I was young.
Okay.
Oh, I remember every second of it.
I know, like that's
Yeah.
that was a huge formative moment for you and the culture. And like for me, I heard about the trial, and of course, like most people told me it was a total sham and they thought he was guilty and all that. But the crazy thing because in the last decade or so, like there was a really great documentary that ESPN did.
Oh gosh,
Yes.
yeah.
OJ Simpson Made in America was a miniseries. FX had like a short fiction, not fictional, but it was like,
Yeah.
they redid the trial essentially with actors. And so I just had no reference for it makes sense now. I had no idea how famous he was. I had no idea what a great football player he was for a long time in my life because the first time he was mentioned, after I was kind of formative and consuming media, the first thing everybody talked about was the trial and the murder case. And so I didn't realize this guy rushed for over not that stuff matters, but he rushed for 2,000 yards.
Won the Heisman Trophy.
He was in all these commercials and he was widely known across the country, and just what a huge flashpoint it was. But I mean, yeah, it's insane. The journey of his life. And I mean, understandably, so many people didn't like him and had no sympathy for him, and watching him interact with the public after the fact. It was so strange. And even after he got out of jail for the memorabilia case, we would see him on social media and just doing these weird videos and trying to talk about fantasy football.
And he'd be like, I got Justin Herbert today. And you're like,
dude, you killed somebody. You can't just act like you're giving us good bets. It's just such a strange thing. And like many people, I had no idea he was sick, and that this was towards the end. But yeah, I mean, it's impossible to ignore the story because he was one of the most famous people that's ever, been in the country.
my generation, my age of people, and maybe Garrett a little bit, but my age, we can remember the news how it was before OJ, and now we see how it was after. And I think that's one of the biggest things that happened was there was so much coverage of this, people forgot and have never remembered that there is not 24 hours of news in a day. In World War II, there was not even 24 hours of news in the day. There was the couple hours of war news that happened, and then that was it. There's not that much news. But then when that shot into, now cable news already existed and everything, but that fed into this whole idea of a 24-hour news cycle so much that we got to cover this. We got to cover this. People want to know. People want to know. People want to know. Which is now fed into the fact that we have the internet right now. So the 24-hour news cycle is even more accelerated because by the time that a cable news outlet says, here's what's going on, there's billions of people reacting to it all over the world. And then the narrative changes all of a sudden because of the reaction, not because of the fact. So it didn't all start with OJ, but OJ was the adrenaline that it needed to fuel the machine.
Well, I mean, you think about things like Court TV, and now we have such a huge true crime wing of media where there's podcasts and documentaries and TV shows and people trying to investigate on their own. And it did introduce a lot of folks to, how the justice system works and how flawed it can be at times. There's issues with race and class and all the politics that go into it and all the different layers to it. It's just it was a crazy thing. And I know, like, it was just an insane thing to live for. Like, there's nothing that we lived through, there's nothing that we can really compare it to that just captured the country like that. Like, I mean, Paul, am I wrong? Like, everybody was watching that trial. Like, it was just, there was nothing else that people were talking about that time other than that trial and that case.
Yeah, absolutely. So it changed so many different things. And again, I don't mean to laugh at the dead, but if you want to go back and listen to great comedy on it, go listen to Norm Macdonald. He did great stuff on OJ over the time. But I thought about that today. I thought about a lot of different things. But it was such a strange thing to see, and that was the moment where people thought hey, we can make money on almost anything. Hey, let's get Kato Kalin to be on this panel show. Who is he? Colin Quinn had a joke on SNL that I remember, is that Nicole Brown Simpson had a friend who was a witness in the trial, and then she did Penthouse, and he was like, who in the world is oh, her friend got murdered, let's look at her naked. It's a weird thing. Yeah, it's such a weird thing that happened out of that. So our world completely changed after OJ. And, that's not what we're going to talk. This is probably the last I'll even bring it up today at all. I'm doing the show by myself because Smokey and Craig are on wedding duty officially, which we'll talk about in a second, Stephen. But it did. It changed our world, and not for the better. And a couple of guys, maybe we learned some things from OJ. I think we did. But in others, it's one of those things that I don't know if the toothpaste can ever go back in the tube from what happened, because then it exposed this really crappy way to make money, which is take a scandal and do everything you can around it to cash in off of it, as opposed to just reporting it. But anyway, so for the next 2 days, Garrett and I will be here without the Smokes, because Jennifer Smoke is getting married on Saturday.
Wow.
Yes, she's finally getting married. She and Daniel are finally walking down the aisle. And Steve and I, we did a mini elopement, my wife and I. We went to Hawaii, a small wedding with family and friends there. Then we came back here and we had a party. How big was your wedding?
150 people?
Oh, see, that's a lot. That's a lot. My parents' wedding was 400 people.
400?
400 people.
Wow.
Italian Catholics, man. Garrett did the courthouse.
Yep. Best move.
He has no regrets about it.
Not one.
Not one. I don't know if Anna does or not. See, there we go.
She loved it.
Did you just have one witness there, Garrett?
No, well, yeah, you know what? Yes. I think somebody they brought in was a witness, but we didn't have anybody with us. We just went up there, got married. She went to work, and I went home. That was it.
That's great.
Straight up.
How long had y'all been together at that point?
We've been off and on since I got a picture actually from a friend yesterday when we were 15 and 16. Okay. So it's one of those type of things.
Yeah.
So
are they doing? Where is this? Can you tell me where this is? I mean, not the exact address.
It's in Tyler.
Okay.
It's in Tyler. Okay. So I'll be attending this weekend. So have a new suit and everything.
That's exciting.
So yeah, my wife said you got to get a suit, and I said no. She said, this is not a democracy. This is not you know.
Sorry. You know. Let me rephrase. You're getting a suit.
There's no election here. There's not going to be Paul gets a new suit or Paul doesn't get a new suit. That's not up on the ballot.
Scott Drew has to stay at Baylor, and Paul Catalina has to wear a suit to Jennifer's wedding.
Yeah. So this is not how this works. So yes, no, I've got to. It's actually, I think I just got the email today. It's been done being hemmed, and
all right,
and I'll look rather dapper. So
is Craig gonna give a speech?
No. So they had asked Craig to do the ceremony, and he had agreed to do it, but I don't think it was the first thing he would have asked to do.
Yeah.
So, no, Craig, they had a groomsman who had to fall out because he's at the Masters this weekend.
Yeah.
And so Craig gets to move into
Groomsman duty?
Yes. The easiest possible job you can have at a wedding.
It really is.
It's a great. I've been a groomsman a great many times. It's a great job. Like the biggest thing you have to do is like one of the bridesmaids comes to you and is like, hey, can you guys take the bride over here before we do this? Because we can't have the groom see him. And you're like, yeah, sure. I don't.
It really is insane. Like, you know, the bridesmaids, they have to do all these showers, all these parties. The groomsmen have like the bachelor party, and then you just show up the day of the wedding.
And like, here's the thing: you only have to make modest effort to impress your friend. Like, hey, man, we're gonna go to your favorite restaurant, or we're gonna go to this city, and we're gonna go to this cool restaurant and this cool thing, and then we're gonna go sit at the place where we're staying and hang out. And you're like, man, that's great. But if like you've told the girls at the bachelorette party, like, hey, we're gonna go to a couple cool restaurants, we're gonna do a couple cool little activities, like one a day for a couple hours. The rest of the time, we're just gonna hang out.
Yep.
They'd be like, well, this is not very planned, and that was inconsiderate. And just hanging out with your buddies is like the most considerate thing you can do for a guy. Yeah. Like, just like, what are we doing, guys? Oh, nothing. We're going to watch this game and have a couple beers and some food. And you're like, oh, I can't believe you guys thought of me that way. That really
the one thing I did that I thought was a mistake but worked out, like I told her, like my wedding was at 4, I think. Yeah. I told everybody to get there at like 10 a.m. And, you know, you find out with guys, like, it doesn't take us long to get ready. So, you know, after, like, an hour, you're pretty much done. And so then you're just like, okay, we got, like, 4 hours to kill here. But we just watched college hoops on the small TV in this little, you know, resort place. And it was fun. Just like, all right, yeah, we'll just sit around and do that. But
for mine, you know, Amanda and I was in a different hotel room the night before. And she had to get up. Our wedding was at 9 a.m. So she had to get up at like 4 o'clock, you know.
Get ready, yeah.
I got up at 7. Maybe 6:30. I didn't really sleep the night before all that much. I was like,
some nerves,
I was like excited, nervous, you know, all this. So you know, it's the only time in Hawaii at all that I watched television, you know, because I was just like, well, I read a book that I had, you know, and just kind of, and most of my stuff was in the other room. So, like, even then, like, you know, I didn't have...
wasn't a lot to do.
Wasn't a lot to do, you know. Then I stopped watching. Like, I was watching like, the hotel had, like, Netflix. Mm-hmm. I said, well, if I don't stop binge watching this, I'm not going to go to sleep at all. Like, I'm just going to be up because I'm, like...
Yeah,
now into it. But, like, I remember my best man came in at, like, 7:30, you know, and... We literally got, like, dressed at 8:30. Went downstairs.
Showtime.
Got everybody over to the wedding by 9. Let's go. Let's do this. And, like, the whole time I was starting to freak out because I was like, I have not heard from her. Like, make sure of this, make sure of that. And I was like, man, she's going to be all stressed out. And it was fine. Everything was great. So
that's the way to do it.
Yeah. No, and, like, when I hear about having, like, all these people having to do these big, gigantic weddings and, like, it just have all these plates spinning, I'm just like, no, but I did it right.
It's just one day. I mean, it's an important day. I get it. Yeah. And ultimately, like, you got to do it. Like, if that's what you want, then go for it. But it's a lot of stress.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you, the only time I was miserable the whole time is the next day we went on this van tour around Oahu. And I thought it was going to be on, like, one of those comfortable, like, buses with, like, benches on either side where you can look out. And the company had sold those buses, and it was just like a 18-passenger van, and it was like being on a 10-hour Southwest flight. So it wasn't my favorite thing in the world. Like, get out, like, hey, we're going to go see some seals. Oh, are we? Great. Oh, good, I saw one. I'm going to sit here on the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Amanda, you ever wonder what it would be like to be a minor league baseball player?
It was us and, like, the family, like, everybody went. So it was, like, all of us. And so it was, like, you know, it was fun in the regard that we got to be with everybody, but by the end of the day, we were just like, I'm going back to the hotel.
See y'all later.
I'm getting in the pool, and I'm getting in the one with the swim-up bar so that I only have to do this. Like, this is the motion I have for the rest of the day. Right here. This right here. That's all I like. This one more time again. So, but anyway, yes, I'll be there this week. I can't wait. Jennifer and Daniel, great couple. Daniel, great guy. So that's going to do it for us, Steven. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Paul.
And thanks to our hopeful new sponsor,
BidetKing.com. Hey, let's do it.
BidetKing.com. I will not rest until I am your spokesperson. And there's a bidet in every bathroom in America. Every public bathroom, hotel bathroom,
Homes,
airplane, train, bus, whatever it is. I will not rest. I promise you that.
Paul's me up for a long time. Goodbye, everybody.
So long, everybody. Thanks to bidetking.com.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple